You ready there, Denise? Good evening, everybody. The meeting come to order. First order of business, public comment. Anybody wants to recognize, raise your hand. Recognize you, name, address, and come to the podium 3 minutes. I guess there's no interest. We'll move on at this time. Next order of business, Dr. Moore, Superintendent, Brian Cisneros, School Board, Oyster River Cooperative School District. And there's 2 items. Welcome.
Thank you again. I have to say that I'm super impressed I got invited back.
There you go.
So to give you backstory on the work that we've been doing, so about 5 years ago when I became superintendent, there was approximately $4.5 million worth of backlog of capital needs through the district. The biggest one was the high school heating system, which from the point of time that the high school was remodeled until 5 years ago, the heating system wasn't regulated and it was wasting fuel like nobody's business. So we called in Siemens, and Siemens did an analysis, and Siemens is the company we work with. There are many companies you could choose. Siemens came in and regulated the heating system at the high school with a payback of less than 2 years. And as you guys know from the work that you do, that's a pretty incredible payback. So that caused us to reflect on other buildings in the district. And so we had Siemens come back and they did an analysis of the district once again, this time the elementary schools, Massway, Moheramet, and the middle school. And they came back with other energy saving projects. Nothing like high school because, as you guys know, that's really unusual. You're trying to shoot for an energy payback of between 5 and 10 years. That's pretty typical when you're upgrading heating systems, HVA systems, lighting systems, those kinds of things. So we're in a lease purchase with them right now, which expires next school year. But that motivated us to look at additional capital needs that we have and for additional lighting work, window work, as an example. All of the windows at Massway need to be replaced within the next 3 years. All the windows at Moheramet need to be replaced within the next 3 years. What Siemens was able to demonstrate is the Moheramet windows, for example, they were residential windows from the get-go. When that building opened up, it was opened with inferior windows. I'm sure that it was done as a cost savings issue, as so often happens. And I think what I've been invited here to talk about is leasing versus pay-as-you-go, because we all do pay-as-you-go because you don't incur any interest and so forth. However, the advantage of leasing is it's a legitimate alternative to bonding. You're not trying to build a building, you're just trying to get ahead of your capital needs. And this first sheet that I printed off for you was to show you that it's pretty typical. Barrington School System right next door did it as recently as last year. But I also wanted to make sure I gave you a list that showed municipal users. So you can see the city of Bedford's done it, the city of Springfield Block, the city of Westfield, and so forth. So you can see the list. Because it's not just open to schools, it's open to municipal organizations. So I wanted to give you that sense. So what is the advantage to leasing? You can do a lot of work up front and then pay for it over time. So for example, the windows at the 2 elementary schools, that's $1 million. So like you know, when you're trying to develop your capital plan, $1 million is a sizable obstacle. We totally anticipate, I mean, the board hasn't voted yet, but they will be voting on December 6th, I hope, that we're going to add a 4-classroom addition to the Massway School because of the enrollment increase. That's $1 million. So I can't do the classroom addition, $1 million, and the lighting, $1 million, and the windows, $1 million, and so forth, because just like you, there's limitations to what you can do in terms of capital improvement in any given 1 year. So the leasing provides the opportunity for us to get ahead of the capital needs by front-loading those initiatives, lighting, windows, and so forth. And then taking out a lease as opposed to a bond. And a lease, it works just the way any other contract that you deal with or the school board deals with, in that it's the elected body that votes on it. And then the way it would work is you'd set a certain amount of your capital budget aside to pay for the lease. So the lease we're under right now is 5 years. The lease that we did 5 years ago was just for 2 years. The lease that we're considering now at the school board level could be 10 years. And so obviously the longer you go out, the more interest you pay. But here's the nice thing about a lease. The interest you pay on a lease is less than the interest you pay on a bond. We're anticipating a lease interest rate of about 2.5%. That's what it's been, right around 2.5%. Depending on what you know, Siemens would come in and analyze your buildings for you and give you a wonderful report. That's what they did for us. And then as a body, you select what projects you want to get done. They'll give you a laundry list, but I'm sure you are plenty aware of what some of your needs are. But these people go in and they do an incredible analysis of your infrastructure. And there's probably more that needs to be done than you know right now, and it's probably more than you can afford to do right now. So they'll do that audit, and then you'll qualify for not just the energy savings that you'll get by doing certain work, but you'll also qualify for rebates. So the rebates will help pay down the cost. The energy savings helps pay off the cost. In the first lease arrangements that we did, the one on the high school and the one that we're currently under, the savings actually paid for the lease payment. This would be like round 3 of working with Siemens. And when you're dealing with windows, as an example, windows do not have a good payback period. They just need to be replaced, because if you don't replace them, the sills rot, water gets into the building, you end up with mold, et cetera, et cetera. So windows don't ever come under an energy savings window. They just come under the window of you got to replace them. And as you guys know, when you look at Massway, the whole front, side, back of that school is windows. So it's something we have to do. So you get energy savings that offset the cost, you get rebates that offset the costs. Here's another neat thing about this particular arrangement. There's no risk to you as a town, there's no risk to us as a school system. Who takes the risk? The leasing bank. So they assume responsibility for the note. And in this case with Siemens, they guarantee their work. So if there's something that they guarantee their savings as well as their work. So if they project you're going to save X amount of dollars over a period of time, and you don't, they make up the difference. Now, clearly, when they make those estimates out, they make them very conservatively. You're going to actually save more than they project because they don't want to have to pay out, so they're conservative in their estimates. And so ultimately, it's an alternative to bonding. It's great in terms of your use of public funds. You can maximize what you can get done. You have to commit to a certain payment out of your budget for the length of the lease, whether you go 5, 10, or 15 years. But the payback to the taxpayers is pretty amazing. They get immediate energy savings on the projects. They get immediate rebates on the projects. And what you get is a lot of your projects off the table. So that's in essence how our leasing arrangement works with Siemens. We have found them to be a quality company. So we could go out, and Honeywell does this same kind of work, Johnson's Controls does this same kind of work. But once you start down this path, what we found is if you have a preferred vendor, and our policy at the school board level allows us to stay with preferred vendors, we don't go out to bid because it doesn't make any sense. As you think about HVAC controls, for example, you don't want 4 different control mechanisms in 4 different schoolhouses. You want one. When we go out for boilers and the controls on boilers, what we've done since I've been superintendent is we replaced the boilers at Massway School. They're the same boilers that we have at the middle school. They're the same boilers we installed at Moharrimet. So what we're doing is also standardizing the infrastructure in the district, and that makes a lot of sense in terms of repair and replace. Give you an example. Some of the infrastructure issues are so dated at this point that it cost us thousands of dollars for a park that should cost us hundreds of dollars. We had a control mechanism go at the middle school. Middle school is being 81 years old. Those controls aren't made anymore. It was going to cost us in the avenue of about $6,500 to buy a control that should have cost us several $100s if it was still in production. So you also have the economy of, taking dated equipment out and putting newer equipment in. And they're masters at the HVAC component. They really know their stuff. This is what they do for a living. And doing this kind of work is really how they've leveraged municipal and school government dollars to make elected officials, superintendents, town administrators look like they're using taxpayer dollars incredibly wisely, and you would be. So I'm glad to answer any questions you guys have.
I have a couple. The other companies you mentioned, Honeywell, Johnson Controls, do they offer the same kind of?
Yep, they do. I mean, those are the big players in the game.
Mhm.
I used Honeywell up in Maine. They were a fine organization. Just happened that when I came in, we started down the Siemens path. Both of them great companies, so I had no problem with going with Siemens, and Siemens has been a great partner for the district for the last 5 years.
And did I hear you correctly when you said that just like, if you would, the traditional way, that the voters would still participate in the approval of this?
They don't have to, because it's not a bond, it's a lease. So it's like any other contract you guys approve. It's straightforward lease. So at the end, you own the equipment. So the voters, it's not like going to a bond. Like when we go to the middle school, that'll be a bond.
Has that been done before also?
Yep. All of these.
All of these were that way? I mean.
Yep, that list there it's been tried and true across New Hampshire.
Okay, I'm just.
Yep.
Okay.
I mean, yeah.
The amount you're talking about, the last one was 2 million, you said?
Mm.
And the one you're in now?
Yeah, so I can't remember exactly, John, the amounts of the previous leases, because they're kind of in the back of my mind. But they all have paid for themselves to date, meaning the energy savings and rebates have paid for themselves.
So the one that you're going forward with, how much is that?
That one is, well, that's what the board is debating.
Yes,
So
I understand.
Siemens came in with $12 million worth of projects. Clearly, there's no way on God's green earth that we could afford to do $12 million worth of projects. So instantly, we took the middle school project off the table because we're in the process of, analyzing that school and whether it will continue to serve the school's needs, district's needs. So that was half of it. I mean, the middle school by itself, compared to the high school and the 2 elementary schools, was half of the projects. So our goal with the middle school is to always do life and safety issues because those are critical. We don't want those to fail. But in terms of investing in windows or lighting projects, that'd be a total waste of taxpayers' money if 3 years from now the taxpayers say, yeah, the building it's done its duty. So we took that off the table. And then since then, in our budget hearings, we've looked at $7 million worth of projects, $4.5 million worth of projects, and $3 million worth of projects. We looked at 15-year lease, 10-year lease, 5-year lease. And so the board is discussing, one, whether they want to go forward with a new lease at all. And if they do want to go forward, how big of a chunk of work do they want to chew off based on how much money they want to commit in every budget, the life of that lease. So that's where they're at. The lighting is, as I said, is about $1 million. The windows are about $1 million. And then there's all kinds of smaller issues, like one of the things that we do want to do at the middle school is clean all the ductwork, because it is so old that at this point we're concerned about the air quality of the building. They talked about replacing all the transformers at the high school. There's a dozen of them. We didn't get too keen on that idea because we felt like if we could do the lighting that would take the pressure off the transformers. And so those kinds of, so the board is now kind of looking at it in order of priority. The two things that continue to stand out in our discussions are the windows and the lights. And then the chair asked, well, what if we didn't do a lease this time? What if we paid as we go? We gave them a 5-year capital improvement plan, and when the chair asked for a pay-as-you-go, we had to go out to 10 years, because, you know, as you guys know, you push off things and you prioritize within that 10-year period.
So what I'm hearing is it's predominantly ways or energy saving.
The first two that we did
Yeah.
are absolutely energy saving issues. This one is a combination of energy savings, lights, with major capital needs, windows. You know, people argue that windows are an energy savings. I would say I've never taken that position. The reason I don't is because the R factor in windows is really, really low. But when you get into sill rot, water seepage, that kind of thing, then windows become pretty important.
Did I hear it properly? You want to add 4 rooms on the master way?
I do.
Does that fall under this?
This would be
That's
pay as
separate.
you go.
Just want to make sure.
Yeah, that's in the proposed draft budget. We are just looking at the enrollment at Massway, and you know, you're up about 75 kids from 5 years ago, and we're now running out of space. You know, so we right now have a combined 1-2 that we would, if we had the space, would be a 1 by itself and a 2 by itself. And music is now on the stage where it was in a classroom for a little bit. We would rather put that in a classroom. And then 3rd grade is going to expand from 3 classrooms to 4 classrooms. So if we don't add on to Massway, the other option is to put a modular in. And we saw what happened at Moheramet with a modular that was supposed to be temporary. It's still there 20 years later. And my recommendation to the school board is don't go down that path, you know, build 4 classrooms. So if that gets approved by the voters in March, if the budget gets approved by the voters in March, then we'll go forward with, I think we'll go forward with the addition on Massway. We were going to do the front entry of Massway. You might recall we talked about that whole piece getting done, but with the enrollment increase, we're shifting our priority to the classroom. And so that's independent of this.
Scott?
Julie, can you ask him about the RSA implications of this?
Sure. DRA actually wants schools and municipalities to have lease purchase agreements on individual warrant articles. RSA 33(7)E is the governing statute for lease purchase agreements. And it does make mention of the fact that the legislative body is a simple majority. So I suppose if you just put the payment in the operating budget, that's a way to get the legislative body to approve it.
Mm-hmm.
But regardless of that, DRA prefers that lease purchase agreements. And as a matter of fact, DRA recommends that every year you have a warrant article for the payment thing. Just because you get it approved once doesn't mean that you put it in the operating budget. But the statute certainly maybe leaves some wiggle room for not making it a separate warrant article. And certainly, if you want it to go through the operating budget, it has to have a non-appropriation clause.
Yep,
Because
they
if the
do.
contract does not have a non-appropriation clause, then DRA considers it to be just like a bond, it's a loan, and you have to put it in a warrant article, and you have to get a 3/5 approval. So certainly DRA and the attorney at NHMA strongly would recommend, certainly if we were doing it, I can't imagine that we would ever be able to put forward a $3 or a $4 or a $7 million project and not put it as a warrant article. But it seems that that statute maybe allows you to do that.
Correct.
Well, I would encourage the school board, I'm speaking to one of them now, that you put that as a separate and not try to put it inside everything else. Because you've got voters that come there and they see what's on the warrant, that's basically all they see. And if you're putting something as major as that inside the operating budget, they're gonna potentially miss it. And I'm not saying that I'm against it or for it, I
Right.
think I want that, I would hope that you guys would want to disclose that you are doing this.
We would disclose it at deliberative session, Scott.
But
We've done this
also-
twice now, and we've talked about it at deliberative session. As Julie, has alluded to, a recommendation is not a mandate, and it's not required. And all of these other communities in New Hampshire have done it and not gone through the bond routine.
Do
I'm
we
not
know
saying,
that for a fact?
We know that most of these on here have.
yeah. And
Well,
I'm-
I agree that they have lease purchase agreements with Siemens, but that does not necessarily mean that they didn't put it as a warrant article.
Well, I would encourage you guys to follow up, because my understanding is most of these did not go through a bond like warrant.
So I'm not saying a bond like warrant, I'm just saying a separate warrant for that particular purchase. And I understand you talk about the deliberative session, but how many people show up to the deliberative session versus how many that vote? Is a very small percentage. So I'm just saying in terms of, I know the school district wants to be transparent, and this would be more transparency if you have it as a separate one, so.
Thank you.
Any other comments on the board? Anybody from the audience like to speak? Please, name and address.
Paul Gazowski, 46 Lamprey Lane. I saw this on tonight's agenda, and I'm glad it's on tonight's agenda. I'm glad the superintendent is present. And I went to, in our backup, it didn't have the proposed agreement with Siemens, so I went to the school board site. And in the backup for the most recent school board meeting, it did have the Siemens packet, the proposal. So my first request is that that packet be remounted, in a way that's easier to see, because I had trouble seeing it and reading it. And I think it's important enough that it needs its own separate tab, and it needs to be large enough. I had to magnify it, and then it get all pixelated, and I couldn't understand it. Having said that, I was connected with, indirectly connected with the initial agreement with Siemens through the Sustainability Committee in the school district, and I can attest to how well that worked. One of the reasons why it worked so well at the high school was that the high school HVAC system, which is a very large system, and Siemens didn't design the system, was never commissioned, and the building was opened. And so in effect, Siemens came in and explored the system, and in effect commissioned the system, or if you will, recommissioned the system. There was an immediate return, a very dramatic return in that. At the same time, there was a lighting changeover in the high school that was measurable. I'm all for the track record of Siemens in the school district, and I'm all for the visibility of that track record. And I think there are baselines that were measured back then, and those baselines were brought forward, and I think those baselines would be brought forward with this proposal. If this is going to get tucked into line items, I don't think that's desirable. I think it should be a healthy part of the public hearings on the school district budget and part of the larger discussion. There's no question, there shouldn't be any question with most of the people in this room that I support sustainability and energy efficiency, and I'm not going to question this proposal. I am going to point to the fact that I think it would be in the proposal's favor to be extremely public with it and to show the baselines and the improvements and to go out. And I know windows aren't going to have great return on them, but to go out and to project baselines for the return on this. I think people deserve to know. In reviewing the Siemens packet that was attached to the school board agenda, there was a section that talked about redoing the roof of the cafeteria and the auditorium and the gym, I think, in the high school. And in parentheses was solar. And that goes back to, all the way back to 2008 when Siemens came on board. Before Siemens came on the scene, Revision Energy, under a different name at that time, approached the school district with doing a solar project on the roof of the high school. And that passed through the Sustainability Committee and the school board at the same time. My recollection is the committee's recommendation was that the high school wasn't ready for any solar project because the HVAC hadn't even been fine-tuned and commissioned. So it was kind of ludicrous to be suggesting anything that would improve efficiencies when you didn't even have a baseline of efficiencies. Now that we have a baseline of efficiencies, I would like to see in this plan two things. Where we're basically going to reduce our fossil fuel dependency, and hopefully I don't think there's any building in the school district that's on fuel oil. We're all on a propane or natural gas. Better than that, I would like to see how we're sourcing that product, but we'll leave it at that. And I would also like to see when Siemens shops these proposals with vendors, are they shopping multiple vendors, or do you have a choice in vendors? That Siemens comes in with a window contract? Who's involved in the conversation, or is Siemens simply saying this is what we're going to give you? So that's all I have to say. That's not going to sound very supportive, but but it is supportive, and it's coming from a guy who basically pays attention to these things, and it's saying this is big money, and people, and I think it's a good proposal, and I think it'll fly, but people need to see it fully exposed. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments in this area? Thank you. You have your second point?
So thank you for asking for the school department's opinion on the crossing, painting the crossing on 155. Despite the report that you got from the New Hampshire Department of Transportation, we think painting a crossing path for the kids is critical. So, I read the report from the gentleman, and I was thinking, okay, well, that all makes sense if you're maybe analyzing the cost of putting down paint versus its value. But I would think that if the chief was here, I would think that he would be in the same place I am. The speed in front of the school is always a problem. He periodically puts a car there to remind people to slow down. I think people react to safety concerns. I see the sign, they see a crosswalk, they see a school. I think all those visual cues help for people to register they're in front of a schoolhouse. And then I think also the fact we do have young children who cross 155, who live right across the street, and is the value of their lives more important than the department's fixation on efficiency related to paint. And I would always, what does it cost them to put a crosswalk there? I would argue that crosswalk is a symbol that people register that helps them understand to slow down. It's just another tool that we have to warn drivers that they're in front of a schoolhouse. And so I disagree with that report completely. And what is, I guess my question for the selectmen is, are you the ones that officially respond? Are you looking for something from me that would say, I absolutely want a crosswalk there?
Well, first of all, I agree with you. As many symbols or signs are far better off. Julie, do you have an input on this?
Well, what I got out of this letter is DOT is not going to put in the crosswalk after they redo the road, period. End of discussion. We could certainly write to them and say we disagree, but I doubt very much that they're going to change their minds. That being said, if you want the crosswalk, either the school or the town has to agree to maintain it.
Yeah, and so, you know, I'm pretty comfortable in saying that we'd be willing to maintain it with the town. If you want to do it as a joint effort, that's what I do over in Madbury. There's a crosswalk that comes across the library, that's a state road also where the town office is because of the dam. And so we maintain the crosswalk at the library for the parking lot. We maintain the crosswalk from the town office to that parking lot. We do it together. We put down the paint, the initial paint, we're okay with that. I just, you know, I don't want to chase after NHDOT if they're absolutely not going to do it. I think it's insane and I think it's silly on their part, but I don't think the people in this room are silly. So I'd say we should do it together and call it good if that's our option. Do we have the option of doing that, Julie, on a state road?
They're telling us that if we want it, we have to do it.
Then I can say pretty comfortably that we're in.
Opinion?
I think we ought to go on record and send them a letter anyway. I agree that we should take care of the crosswalk, but I think we ought to go on record, and I think you should go on record as well. This is
Absolutely.
one dumb decision.
Yeah,
Yeah, so let's get a letter together. I'll leave the town administrator, you can work it out, just a letter, but yes, we'll go in agreement, you can work it out with Julie.
sure. And do you want me to get a cost on that?
Sure.
Sure, absolutely.
We'll chase after the cost and go from there.
Sounds good to me.
All right.
Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you. Appreciate it. I'm sure the families will appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, safety is paramount.
And thank you to you and Brian for coming in tonight.
Oh, you're really welcome.
Thank you.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you. Next item of business, Julie Goodman.
So, you are aware that after we put out the agenda, we received a decision from New Hampshire, from Stratford County Superior Court relative to the VRC versus ZBA. And the court ruled, I will say, very much in our favor. So, a couple of things flow from that. There is an appeals period of 30 days from the date of notice, and the appeal, if one is going to be made, is made to the New Hampshire Supreme Court. And then, of course, the Supreme Court sets the schedule for when and how it's going to be handled. So it will take, our attorneys are of the opinion that it would take probably 6 months to a year after the Supreme Court gets the appeal, if they get the appeal, to when we would get a decision from the New Hampshire Supreme Court. So. The other thing that the board wants to consider at this point is putting out a statement. And I sent you earlier in the day a draft from the attorney, so I don't know whether you had an opportunity to look at it, or if you have any comments on it, and what your timing on it wants to be, and then if you can agree, or when you agree on what the statement should say, what do we want to do with it? In other words, do you just want to read it into the record in a meeting? Do you want to do that and also send it to the local newspapers? Again, as I think you know, there were recent letters to the editor and articles in both Foster's and the Union Leader relative to this, so.
My opinion is that we probably should read it into the record and send it to newspapers.
Okay,
Comment.
You have no comment?
No, I don't really.
I read this, I like this. The only thing that's missing here that maybe we can consider putting in is, it doesn't mention if Mr. McDonald and the VRC had gone through the regular process like everybody else, because we're not holding them to any different standard we hold everybody else. He would have been having his houses and he would be up and running doing stuff, so.
Well, we don't know that.
What?
We don't want to say that.
Okay. I'm just thinking that if he would have followed the rules like because we're not trying to make him do anything that we don't have other residents do.
Correct, but I guess what we don't know right now is if he had gone through all the proper procedures, would he have been granted, I'm guessing it might have been some kind of variance or something, I'm not certain
Okay,
not.
I see what you mean. Okay.
As to whether he could put up
Okay.
13 houses in
Okay.
a single family. That was my hesitation there,
Okay,
that it's true he didn't follow any of the procedures or any of the rules or any of the processes.
Yep.
But we don't know what the outcome might be if he were to do that.
fair enough. Maybe we can put something in about, we're not holding him to any different standard than we're holding other property owners in the
Well,
town.
that's true, he's just following traditional ZBA rules and regulations.
Maybe something like that included in the last sentence or the last
Mhm.
paragraph?
Well, he did a statement, was it yesterday?
Yeah.
Or today, that said he's gonna
Yeah.
take it all the way up to
Yeah.
wherever.
Well, we can only go
And,
one level up, so.
I definitely think we should put a letter out there.
So I agree, we should read it into the record here, but then send it to the local media.
Mhm.
The union leader, his things have appeared in the union leader, they've appeared in Foster's, and
Yes.
I believe they've been in Portsmouth too. So
At least those
Yeah.
three.
Yeah.
All right, well, I will draft something, send it to the attorney, and then we'll go from there,
Sounds good, yeah, one more clearing from the attorney would be great.
okay?
So as long as we're okay with the language, can we authorize the town administrator to send it to those 3 media outlets?
As long as we get the language clear, yes.
Yeah.
And then we can read it at the next meeting?
Yeah.
Yes,
So Foster's, Union Leader,
Portsmouth Herald.
Portsmouth Herald.
well, it's all Seacoast Online, so
Yes,
where
Well, except for union leaders.
they, right, but Foster's and Portsmouth Herald,
I
right?
know. That will go into the Hampton, there's what, 6 of them? Something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
and I'd like to say this will be the final statement from the board. I don't want to chase this all the time, just one statement should be sufficient. Hopefully.
I think we ought to put it in the e-crier. I think it should be the board issued this response.
Sure.
All right, I think people need to know that this lawsuit that's been ongoing back and forth has a decision.
Was there any clarification about, speaking with Karen, there were some other things that were kind of nebulous in the
The
decision?
attorney is issuing or filing a motion to clarify
Okay,
relative to what steps can we now take now that we have this decision.
okay, thanks. Thank you for doing all that.
Any other questions, comments on the statement?
You haven't read it yet.
Okay.
I will get it to you,
Um,
unless you want me to read it now.
Just the statement,
Did you read it?
or the
I
decision?
think I
I
did.
mean, we could put a link to the actual decision. I guess I'd want to talk with the attorney about
I'll
the
speak with the attorney
advisability of it.
Well, it's a public document, right?
It is a public document,
So-
yes.
Yeah.
Bill Booth has completed his analysis, if you will, of the various ADA issues that have been put together by AG
Good.
Architects. So he is asking what his next step is. Would you like him to meet with the TCVC? Do you want him to come to a select board meeting to talk about it before that?
Well, the TCVC is just promoting the
Yeah.
plan that we've already agreed
Yeah.
to, so they
Okay.
don't have anything, I wouldn't think, anything to do with that.
Yeah, I think
They should be knowledgeable of it,
Yeah.
but I would like him to come to us and
Okay,
let us know what he's done.
Absolutely.
as an example, he does not believe that the ramp at Town Hall needs to be replaced, needs to be changed. It all, according to Mr. Booth, fits within ADA requirements. It's the right width and it's the right pitch.
But there's no automatic door opener, so that's in violation, isn't it?
I don't think it's in violation.
Okay.
Would it be nice to have? Yes, but that's not the same as saying we have to do it.
Okay.
But certainly Mr. Booth would be able to
Looks
speak
good.
more to that.
Okay, thank you.
Speaking of buildings and analysis, I know that at one time we had some kind of air quality testing done in Town Hall. I think it was a few years ago, and it may have been done by the NHMA, or what was at the time, PLT. I would like permission from the board to at least explore what it would cost to get, say, a company like the Lawson Group. I am noticing that the problem, the mold, the mildew, smell, it's there every day now, which I think is unusual because I don't think it used to be there once it got cold. And it's more consistent than it used to be, and it's stronger than it used to be. And so I'd like to at least find out what it would take to get that tested and determine if it's as bad as I think it is.
I think it's a proper move at this time.
Okay? And then just clarification, we had talked at the last meeting about volunteer of the year nominations, but we weren't really clear on how or if you wanted us to solicit nominations from anyone.
Yeah, I think we just mentioned it in the 6th meeting, didn't we? We should ask all the department heads and the,
Okay,
not departments, commissions, committees, and
Commissions and committees
people that deal with volunteers.
okay,
to make a recommendation.
Yeah, also the transfer manager too, because he has volunteers. So anybody that you can think of.
okay.
Just have them write a small paragraph, Lisa, a justification.
Yep.
It doesn't have to be rambling 5 pages. Succinct is good.
I think that's all I have.
And Denise has one item related to the volunteer party, that she's gonna check with the chief. The
Oh,
time,
yes.
The time that they gave the food on the bill, it's at 3:30.
Yeah, the police chief's in charge of that.
Right, but he wants me to check with him.
Oh, whether it's really 3:30?
It's 3:30.
well, if the thing is 6 till 9.
It's a little early.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe
Well, if
that
he's sitting there
means,
for a while.
maybe that means not before 3:30?
I don't know, I thought it'd just better to clarify.
Yep.
I would hate for them to show up and, oh, here's your food at 3:30, and then,
Oh, well,
How are they gonna
we're
keep it
picking
warm?
it up. So,
oh, okay.
yeah.
Right, it says pick up,
Yeah.
3:30.
I think that's everything.
Sounds good. I noticed I didn't get a copy of the abatement issue.
Mhm.
Yeah, wasn't in one of mine.
Oh, that's because we just got it today.
Okay.
It's relative to Freedom Ring. When I gave the town clerk tax collector the two
Okay.
that the board already signed, she
Yes.
advised me that it's also for 2015,
Mhm.
in addition to 16 and 17.
Okay.
So we need to abate 15.
Okay, thank you. I move to accept the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second, but I have a question on, did C get changed? From our conversation today, Denise?
Yes.
So C changed, okay.
And you're seconding that.
Yes.
Any other further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
So how's my pen servicing your needs today?
It's a nice pen, it doesn't, it's got a few, you know, it could be, it's not ergonomically correct. It's something about the way it sits in your hand on the correct.
There.
Yeah, try ergonomically correcting that.
Are you passing those out to potential voters? Is it
No, just
instead of a sign?
Just for you. Just for you.
But, so you're still gonna do signs?
Well, I don't know, I'm not, I'll let you for a while. If John's next, John.
Huh?
John's next.
John is next?
Yes. You should ask him.
I don't know that.
What's going on now?
I thought Scott was next.
He's giving me a hard time and I'm trying to get it back.
with you?
Most likely.
Just check.
Are you planning on keeping it? Is that a good idea? Really?
Come on, then, to the table. Trying to make sure.
Be sure, yeah.
Item number 6, motion to, I move to enter into non-public section, New Hampshire RSA 91-A:32D, church property.
Second.
Need a roll call vote, Mr. Bumpy?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. LaCourse? Yes. Motion carries. Item number 8, miscellaneous unfinished business. What say ye?
I don't have anything.
Okay, next.
The Lamprey Trucking Group, we had a meeting on last Friday. We talked about the truck being moved to Epping. Epping is interested to host it. The representative for Epping is going to have a conversation with the selectmen this evening and get back to us. What they're proposing is that they would house the truck instead of Madbury, take on some of the dispatching job, and find out how much they would charge us. Right now, the trucking group pays $1,200 a year to Madbury to house it at the selectman's house. So most likely Epping would charge us a little bit more, but then they didn't even think about charging us anything, so we'll see. So we should find out tomorrow, next day, whenever, in terms of if that's gonna move forward. The dispatching job was gonna go to Northwood, but Northwood let their town administrator go. So, yeah, he's gone. They can't keep one
I
there.
don't even remember his name.
So quickly they go.
Joe something. So Jay Moriarty, the selectman from Madbury, is going to touch base with their select board and see who they're going to send as a representative, because they really need to be on board with this. So they also, we're going to discuss in terms of, do we keep the truck going forward? And if so, we'll enter into this new agreement with Epping. If not, we're looking at seeing who else could do the hauling for us. Shipyard Hauling was one of the companies that we're looking into in terms of maybe is that more cost effective. So that's it. So shouldn't have any big increase, but we'll see.
Okay, question, even though it's tied to the ABC, but is Bob Smith presenting?
I don't have the answer to that yet. I've asked the question, I don't have the answer yet. I know that Karen has been working on it, and working on it with him where he is long distance,
Okay.
but I do not have an answer yet as to whether he will be here next Thursday. Right, the 30th?
30th.
So if anything, if he can't make it, if they have the report, at least we could have that.
Right.
Yeah, all we need to see is the recommended amount of material that have gone into the trust.
Mhm. Mhm.
In reality, though, it's always been my stance, the ABC stands on their own with the operational budget. There's no need to really see capital improvements. That should stand on its own as well. I don't mind it merging a little bit, so,
It's all part of the tax rate.
but it should influence the decisions of ABC. Just my opinion.
Influence is mine, because I look in terms of what that whole tax rate is, and the whole tax rate is made up of those two components, and so that's my opinion.
And we'll leave it at that. Any other opinions around this table?
Not about that.
Move to adjourn.
Oh, can I,
Whoa. There was no second.
can I ask a question? Anything more about the power? Can we fix that? Anything in terms of the power thing that fell off?
Oh, I took a look at it. I've asked Bill Stevens to take a look at it, I just didn't speak to
You
him
have any
about
idea
it
what we're
today.
talking about?
No.
Because I don't know if we can touch those lines That might be
A
something.
certain individual in this room was taking pictures of all the
You know, I
buildings.
went and saw it, I know what you're talking about.
No, we don't know what you're talking about.
Yes, they don't.
Oh, so on the side front corner of Town Hall, so the side that faces Five Mast Road,
Yes.
but in the front, up there, where power lines come to the building, they were attached, it appears, to a piece of board that rotted, and so now the lines are sagging, so,
The guy wire that holds,
Yes.
takes up most of the weight is what pulls off.
right, so
So,
we need to.
but it's just
I
kind
mean,
of
they're not,
sitting.
they're sagging, they're not over the road, they're not on the ground, so it's not an immediate hazard, but it's something that we're looking at. I mean, I did call Eversource for them to take a look at it, so,
Okay. Just, I think the concern was, now that all the weight of that wire is just sitting on the wire, when you get the winds and stuff, you get a lot
Of
of
course,
movement.
yeah.
It could rip off and start a fire, and burn down the town hall, maybe, I don't know.
I don't know, it's brick though.
But that's just a concern, it's
Yeah.
just a safety thing. And then we hate for the town employees to show up with no power and then,
right.
Have to go home. I should send you home. Please.
John Tappan, 187 Stepping Stones Road, and there's a hole in the building about this big. Because that's the piece of board that pulled out with the hook, which is on the ground.
Feels like that's the
So-
least of our worries in that building, but, yeah.
Well, that means.
Depending on which way the wind is blowing when it rains,
Mhm.
that might be a concern to you. That's unfishable.
Oh, isn't that something?
It
Put us
might be of
living.
interest to squirrels or.
Squirrels, bugs, hornets.
Yeah.
They've already found a way into the building.
I was gonna say, we got a whole menagerie up in the attic.
the TCVC meets tomorrow night at 6 o'clock,
Yes.
so. And all members will be in attendance, at least they said they would be in
There
attendance.
we
So
go.
we will start working on that particular issue.
Anything else?
Motion to adjourn?
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Look at